And then I am going to switch my camera. Let's get my goofy face off of here so you can see my desk. I have in the past tried to use two cameras. I'm not good at multitasking, so this is probably the best way to do it. Okay. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad you all are here. I'm super excited to start our first mandala with you. And so I've got my samples up here. I know the colors are probably a little different on camera, but we will walk through that together. This design here is called Beginner's Bliss. So it's fairly simple, and we're going to walk through how to do this design without a stencil, without any pattern on here, because I feel like the easiest way to learn is to kind of block it out in your head first. And then as you get more comfortable dotting, you can use the tools like stencils and the pre-drawn marks, but we're going to kind of just go with this one. So I've got my colors up here. The first thing I'm going to do before I get dotting at all is I'm just going to check my paint. So sometimes what'll happen, like in this one, it's separated just a little bit. So I'm going to open all my paints and I'm just going to give them a little stir. Mine have probably been sitting longer than yours since I mixed these up when I made my samples almost a month ago. And so you're going to have these 5 colors plus brown. So go ahead and give all those a stir. Make sure they are ready to go. I really like using these little paint pots because it's a nice way to get a variety of colors, but every once in a while you'll get what I call a paint booger, which is just where it dries up around the edges. So I like to make sure I don't have any of those in my paint as well. All right, so now I know my paints are ready. And the first thing I'm going to do is paint this brown. So I'm going to get my brown paint out and my brush, and we're just going to paint it together. And then as that's drying, we're just going to do it.
That's your painting.
This is the small stone.
Thank you.
Sorry, I guess that's pretty important to mention, right? This was the small stone that was included in your box. It would be it's an unpainted one. You have a larger one that was brown. It looks like a giant M&M. That one is coming up in another session. So this is just your teeny tiny stone. And so while I paint this, I will mention too, so sometimes Zooms can be awkward. Sure, we've all been in Zooms where there's that one person that's like, can you hear me? Can you hear me? And they can't hear anything. Or somebody's cat walks across the screen, or, all kinds of things happen. But I'm a pretty casual person. So if you guys have any questions at all, hop in. I think Zoom will automatically mute you when you come in, but if you have questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to talk about, feel free to unmute. If I mute you, it's not because I don't want to hear from you so much as sometimes there'll be feedback and things like that. So if you're not chatting, just keep yourself on mute. That'll prevent a lot of embarrassing mishaps from happening. As far as your camera goes, you can have it off or on. I know some people are more comfortable than others being on camera, or sometimes we're munching on a snack or yelling at the dog or whatever. So just be comfortable. So I'm just going to get a nice thick coat of brown on here. And then I'm going to set it aside and let that dry. Welcome. We've got 2 more people hopping in. I was just letting everybody know we are working on our small stone, and the first step is just to paint that brown. So we're getting our stone there and just prepping it with brown paint. I don't have my brown in a little paint pot here, but that's where we are. It's so nice to see so many hop on for this. This is awesome. All right, now what I want you to do, if you are ready to move on, while this is drying, I'm just going to do a few practice dots just to kind of get my mojo going here, to get comfortable with the paint that I'm using and the tools. So what I want you to do is just get out your pack of styluses and sticks. When I I'll refer to them by color because we're all using the same tools. However, if you're using a different set of tools, they may be differently colored. So I know some people in the group have been dotting and have tools. Other people did not. So the color between the sets of tools is different. But right now it's not going to matter because we're just practicing. But I've just got a scrap piece of paper. So if you've got, a piece of junk mail or a scrap piece of paper laying around, go ahead and grab it. You don't need anything fancy, but I'm just going to do a few dots and check the consistency of my paint. So when you dip into the paint, you are going to want your stick to have the paint over the edge. That's going to make sure you've got plenty of paint on there to get a nice dot. I don't know why this Post-it looks so bright. It's really not so bright in person. When you dot, you are going to gently touch the paint to the paper, but you don't necessarily need to touch the stick. So it's just a light little kiss on the paper. If you smush down, what you're going to see is something like this, where you kind of get a little divot in there and it's just not a really nice, clean dot. So if possible, you just want to squish the paint at the tip of that stick. Just barely give it a little kiss. And so just practice a few of these until you're comfortable with the acrylic stick. Regardless of the size, they should all work pretty much the same way. If you're getting little peaks, kind of like a Hershey kiss in your paint, that means your paint has thickened and you just need to thin it down with a drop of water. So these up here are pretty good dots. Those down there mean I either didn't have enough paint or I'm pushing too hard. And so just practice a few of those until you're comfortable. And I always keep a paper towel handy, or a baby wipe, just something to wipe off my stylus when I'm done. When we make dots for pretty much every dot we've got on here, we are going to re-dip every single time. So we're going to dip in paint, make a dot, dip in paint, make a dot. We're going to refresh the paint on our tool every single time. And after you've practiced a few of those, get one of your stylus tools. The stylus tools are the ones with the ball tip at the end. And practice a few dots with those. Again, you want the paint to be over the edge of the ball. You want to have that completely covered, and it's okay if you even go up the stick a little bit. You want to make sure that there's plenty of paint coverage on there. Oh, somebody needs to paint their nails. Look at that. Got a big chip in it. And with these stylus tools, I do lightly touch the paper with the tool. But you don't need to push down very hard. It's just a little kiss. And so you can make a few of those dots as well. Great, so just practice a few of those and we'll get started on our stone in just a moment. I was getting a lot of glare, so I turned the lights off. I think that'll be helpful. I am currently dotting in the dark, but on camera, it looks so much better. All right, I'm going to get started here. Now, don't stress out so much about this one. For some of us, I know this is our first time dotting. So this is, it's called beginners. We're working on a small stone. So don't worry about perfection. Little by little, you're going to get really good at this. But today, this is kind of our first practice stone. So don't stress over the little stuff. Because it's small, it should be fairly easy for us to find the middle. So just kind of visualize the middle. If you want to, you can grab a pencil, and I don't like to make a lot of marks on my stone, but if you want to just kind of make an up and down mark, I call it my north, south, east, and west, and a left and right mark. That might give you a better indication of where that middle is. But I'm going to start with my pink dotting tool, my pink stick here. This is a 10mm stick, and I'm going to dip into the turquoise. Make sure you get your paint up over the edge. When your tool is upright at 90 degrees, it should make almost a little nipple at the bottom there. And we are just going to place that right in the middle. All right, for the next step, I'm going to use my blue dotting tool. We are going to start with the small end, but we're going to switch to the large end, and then we're going to go back to the small end. So first, what I do is I work with coordinates a lot. When I don't have a stencil or when I'm designing on my own, a lot of times I will work with north, south, east, and west. And so when I say that, I'm just referring to north, I mean up, south, I mean down, east, and west. So your four coordinates. So when you're visualizing this, those coordinates would be at the very top and bottom, the very right and the very left. And so what I'm going to do with the small end of my blue stylus is I'm going to make a dot at my north, re-dip into the paint, then a dot at my south, re-dip, a dot at my east, re-dip, and a dot at my west. And whenever I get lost, if I'm looking at a pattern or referencing something, I go back to that. I look at my sample or I look at the image that I'm working from and I reference that picture. You also have some printouts. If you are more of a visual person, you like to follow along visually step by step, you can also have those next to you as we're working. So always feel free to refer back to those as well. So once you get your four coordinates, we're going to do the same thing halfway in between each of these marks. So I'm going to make these little dots halfway in between. All right, now I'm going to flip it over to the larger side of my blue stylus here. And I'm going to use the larger end, and we're going to put a dot right next to this small dot. So I'm going to start with my north, south, east, and west. And because we're building this pattern on our own, what you need to remember about the spacing is that it doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but you want it to be consistent all the way around. So you can work on the same design and adjust your spacing, and it'll look a little different, and there's no right or wrong, and that is absolutely fine. So when I add my bigger dots in those four places, I'm going to come back through and do the same thing with the other 4 points. Then I'm going to flip back over to the small end and I'm going to repeat that process. So we're going to end up with 3 dots at the end of every ray here. When you finish with that, I'm going to wipe, you can go ahead and wipe off your stylus and put that down. I'm going to switch to my green stylus with the large end. I'm going to dip into my green paint. Again, make sure it goes up over the end of that little ball tip there. And in between each of these rays, I'm going to add a green dot. And I'm going to do that as close to the center circle as I can without touching. Remember to re-dip into your paint after each dot that you make.
Tara, which side of the green one are we using? The big one or the little one?
The large one, the big size.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And as we're working, there have been times where I've been teaching a class and somebody would use the wrong end or the wrong tool, just get caught up a little bit and not realize where we are. And what I always say is if you choose to, you can choose to use a different size and it'll change the design a little bit. Or if you do one on accident, that's fine. The key, if you grab the wrong tool, is just to repeat it. So if I had accidentally picked up this large one, and I put a really large dot there, I would just want to repeat that everywhere. And as long as we make sure that that's consistent all the way around, it'll look right. It'll look perfect. These ideas, I'm not following anything specific other than what came out randomly in my head. So you are always welcome to change it too. All right, after that green dot, I'm going to put down my green stylus and I am going to get my purple stick. And I am still working with green. And I'm going to dip into my green paint, make sure it's up over the edge so you've got plenty of paint. Now remember with this, you just want to give it the lightest little kiss. I am going to put this paint, this green dot, right next to that small dot. Now this one is quite a bit bigger. It's probably going to land, you want it to land, if you visualize a circle at the end of this series of blue dots, that's where we want it to be, kind of in line with that. And then I'm going to work that all the way around. So everywhere there's going to be a green dot, there's a small green dot and then a larger green dot. My green dots look yellow, but that is in fact my green paint. All right, I'm going to stick with this purple stick and I'm going to use yellow paint. And I am going to add a yellow dot in between each green dot at the end of that blue line. So we've got the 3 blue dots and then there'll be a yellow dot and that yellow dot will fall in between the 2 green dots. So it's kind of makes a triangle. And we're going to do those all the way around at all 8 points. Oops, now see here, this, I did not have as much paint on for this dot as I did with the other two. And so if you notice that happening, I'm just gonna lightly dot again and try to make those even. And I'm gonna wipe this one off and put it down. I'm gonna switch to my blue stylus on the large end. I'm gonna use white paint. What I'm gonna do with the white paint is in between each yellow dot, right next to that green dot, I'm going to put two smaller dots. So on here, you'll see I've got my green dot, my two yellow. What we're going to do is create these two white dots that go in between the green and this lighter blue right here. That's what we're doing. So I'm going to dip into my paint. Oops, I went a little bonkers. It went all the way up this side. So the large end of the light blue stylus, and I'm going to make 1, 2 dots. And I dip in the paint every time, every dot. All right, we're going to move up in size, and this is where sometimes you might need to adjust. So for the next step, I use my blue acrylic stick. If your piece has more spacing in it and you're getting close to the edge, you might want to go down a size. So if you don't feel like you can fit 2 more rows of the blue stick on here, you might want to downsize to the purple stick. And it'll just change the design slightly, but if you want it to fit on there, that would be my recommendation. If you've got plenty of room to add 2 more rows, go ahead with the blue acrylic stick. And I'm going to use my light teal with a light blue paint. And we're going to add the blue dot next to the 2 small dots. And I'm going to wipe this off, but I'm going to continue using the same stick. And I'm going to use my deeper teal. And I'm going to add this large teal dot that's kind of on the end here. So this goes on the row with the yellow. So we've got green and the light aqua. We're going to have yellow and the dark teal. And so for me, this puts it kind of beyond that curve a little bit. I want to leave a little space because we are going to go back and add a smaller dot. So it's a small dot and then the larger teal. But since we're using this tool, I'm just going to leave a little room, and it goes between the two aqua and next to the yellow with room for a little dot in between. Sometimes when you're working on an edge, it's a little harder. You have to kind of play with the angle a little bit. All right, next I'm going to use my green stylus tool. I'm going to start with the fat end and white paint. And next to these deep teal dots, I am going to add a dot in between the yellow and the deep teal there. Some of these I didn't quite leave enough room. That is kind of the pitfall of not using a stencil sometimes, but I think this is good practice to go, I call it kind of going back to the roots and working without lines in a stencil. I feel like if I use those stencils too often, I get too comfortable. And I'm going to use the same tool, the same color, and do the exact same thing on the other side of the teal. So one dot on each side. All right, to finish up this design, what I'm going to do is add these dots around the edges here. And the way that I did that, I'm going to use my blue stylus here on the larger end. And how I planned those out was I dipped the center dot, and that gave me kind of a gauge of where to put the other two dots. So I know I need to fit two in here, and I'm just going to try to evenly space those.
I can't see what you're doing, Tara. You're out of
Oh,
camera. Sorry.
that's okay.
There, that's
There we go.
perfect.
So I pick my middle, I find my middle in between the two, and I'll place a dot there. And then I know on each side of this dot, I need two dots. So over here, I need 1, 2, and then on the other side, I need 1, 2. And I'm going to do this on both sides and all the way around. So every time I just find that center in between these two white dots in the circle. And then I'm going to put 2 on each side. And this is the hardest part of this design because you might be working on a curve and the spacing can be tricky.
So if you're tempted to dot twice from one, little dip, don't do it.
I have been tempted a few times to do that.
Like-
What'll happen if you do that is there'll be different sizes
Okay.
because little by little your stylus is going to run out of paint.
Okay.
And so actually I'll show you what happens if you do that. So if I continue to dip with the same stylus, see how these little dots get smaller?
Oh, yeah, yeah. You did say that last week. Now I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, so that it's not wrong to do that if you want to have them, graduate down in size. But if you want your dots to be the same size, you have to redip every single time.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe you could get two dots out of one dip.
You can try, you just got to make sure that, maybe with that second dot that you,
Smaller.
yeah, or maybe give it a little more time for that paint to drip. Because see right here, I tried to do one and it ended
Oh,
up
yeah.
a little
Yeah.
smaller. So I
Yeah.
always say to dip every time to keep the sizing consistent, but there's no rules. I'm just giving you kind of the guidelines of what I'm doing. So if you can do it and it works on your end, you are absolutely free to have those little cheats.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So as you're working and as you're finishing up with your dots, what I want to reinforce to you is that, okay, first of all, we did not use a stencil or any design. So you may notice, little tiny imperfections. While you're working, you're always going to be hardest on your art because you're in that mode. Your brain is looking for, what can I do better? What did I do wrong? Am I doing this right? You're kind of focused on that. So when you look at it, tomorrow or the next day, you're going to look at it through different eyes and you're going to see kind of the complete piece. As you're working, you see all those little inconsistencies and the minor differences in the spacing. I promise you, when other people look at it, they're going to view it as a whole piece. They're not going to notice every little tiny detail that you might be noticing today, and you're not going to notice that so much in a day or two. So give yourself a little bit of grace. This is the completed design, but I do want to show you one more thing before we go, and this is called top dots. So what you can do, and it's up to you whether you do this or not, you can continue to embellish this design if you want to. When you make a top dot, you would just let your paint dry a little bit, and then for each dot, you could find a tool that's just a little bit smaller. So for example, in the middle here, I could get a smaller tool. This purple tool is smaller, and maybe I could put a dot on top of that. And then you can kind of change the look of the design by adding top dots. And there are some designs that I've seen where people are adding 2 or 3 or even 4 layers of dots. And it really changes the way things look. So for example, if you're really not feeling that yellow and you want to hide it a little bit, you can add some top dots on there. So maybe I would choose to do that. And you can add your top dots however you want to. You cannot add top dots if you like the way things are. But by adding these top dots, it really changes things and gives it a little more depth. And so I like to, when we get to the part of the pattern where we're doing top dots, I like to let people decide if they want them or not, or how many and what colors. And this is where you can kind of add your own little flair to what we've just done. And what I would recommend is just if you're, I know my inner layers on the one we did today are dry enough that I could add a top dot, but my outside layers probably need a few more minutes. But you want your paint to be somewhat dry so that you can add a dot on top without it mixing, if you want to do that.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you. I get excited when we're kind of at the end and it's time to do top dots because I mean, you can certainly copy what I'm doing, but I don't always give instructions, and I like to see where people go with it, kind of using your own colors and your own ideas. So you can see just by adding dots on the top, it takes this design that we just did and just makes it look more detailed and more in depth. So feel free to play with that a little bit. And then if anybody wants to, I'm gonna let's see, I will remove my spotlight. So if anybody wants to show what they're working on or what they're doing, you can go ahead and unmute and Anybody want to share? Oh, Shalene's
I'm
going
gonna
to.
replay your video and watch it and do it again. Do it when you're in my leisure time because I messed up.
Oh, that's fine. Here, let me.
Oops. Oh, oh.
Oh.
Oh. This is actually the first time I've really done one without guides. I've been dotting for a while. I always use guides, so I'm pretty pleased with
Oh, that
how
is so
even
nice.
everything turned out without the guides. I would have never done it without guides. So thank you for helping
Beautiful.
stretch my comfort zone.
Yeah, that looks really nice. I'm glad you did that. I'm glad it worked out well for you. I know it stresses people out not to have the guides, and sometimes it kind of stresses me out, but it causes me to visually get the idea of what center would be and what in between two dots would look like. So it kind of helps me visualize things a little bit better. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Mary, I see you holding a rock. Do you want to you want to share? Hold on, let me spotlight you.
Oh dear. Okay.
Add spotlight. Oh, I got to unspotlight.
Okay. I'm
There we
kind of in
go.
the dark. So I'm not even, but there it is.
Very nice. I love it. That looks good.
I
Very
like the
nice.
colors.
Very pretty. Let's see. Here comes Elizabeth. I'm going to add her to the spotlight. Oh, looks good.
My
that's
first
pretty.
time ever. So
Wow.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's really impressive for your first time ever. I love it.
Very.
thank you. This was fun.
Yay. I'm so glad everybody's having a good time. All right, I see Shauna's still working, so I won't put her on, give her any pressure. Let's see, does anybody else want to share before I finish up here? All right, let me put my big goofy face back on here. I'll remove that. Hello. So what I would love to encourage you to do is when you're finished and you feel like it's looking good, if you would snap a picture and share it in the group for everybody to see, I would love if you would do that. I think for those people who are a little more shy, it helps them feel more comfortable in sharing. And I would love to see all the variations with the different top dots if you chose to do that. I think they all look absolutely wonderful. For not having a stencil, that is absolutely impressive. And you guys are awesome. Let me get my other samples out here. So what we are going to work on next is this one. It's called the Creative Challenge. And then that will be 1 week from today, same time. And then we've got our artistic, what did I call it? I don't know. Advanced artistry, I think, coming up in 2 weeks, same time. If you are somebody who doesn't like to work along with us, or it stresses you out that we're working at a different speed, the replays are always available as well. So don't feel like you have to rush to keep up. If ever I'm going too fast, please let me know. And then whenever you're comfortable, you have a butterfly template that was included in there. This is what I did as one of my samples, but it should look something like this. And you can just use this for fun, use this to practice on. You can turn this into anything you want. I just thought it would be a fun way to use any leftover paint, but it's also a good way to practice dots too. If you want to pull it out and just play, you can use both sides, either side, whatever you want to do with that. But that's all I've got for you for today, so I won't keep you any longer. Thank you so much for joining me. And then if you need this on the replay, I will make sure it goes up in the group within the next half hour. So
Thank you.
thank you
Thanks,
for
Karen.
joining.
Thank you.
Bye there.
See you guys next week.
Okay.
Hey.